And in spite of our very real need to breathe, we thought, heck, we could go there. And we did, sitting on top of controlled explosions that moved rockets all the way to the moon. Humans apparently don't like being told we have limits. But soon, the age of combustion rockets will be over too. They burn up their fuel too quickly, and using them for travel to the places we're thinking of going, like Mars, or even other stars, will simply take too long. And so, new technologies are needed. But what will get us there this time? For journeys that could take months, or even generations to complete, what solutions could help us bridge such gaps? The exciting part is, the answers are in development. And it turns out, these new ideas are even crazier than rockets. I'm Alex McColgan, and you're watching Astro. Join me in this video as we explore the future of space travel, from the next generation solutions that are just around the corner, to the proposals that feel science fiction, but could one day become science reality. It's only in the last 100 years that humanity has truly begun to venture into space. On the 16th of March 1926, Robert Goddard, the father of American rocketry, launched the world's first liquid-fueled rocket on a farm in Auburn, Massachusetts. It may have only reached about 12.5 meters and was done to little fanfare, but this moment was the beginning of 100 years of chemical-powered rocketry that ultimately led man to the moon. Understanding where we came from is important in understanding where we're going. So let's take a closer look at chemical rockets. Here, thrust is generated by mixing some kind of fuel source, often RP1 kerosene, or other variations refined from crude oil with some kind of oxygen source. For instance, pure oxygen in liquid form in a combustion chamber and then igniting them. Hot things expand, and in such an explosion as this, they expand a lot. A chemical rocket points that explosion downwards. Then, thanks to Newton's third law, where every action has an equal and opposite reaction, the rocket as a whole goes up. Chemical rockets have been the key driving factor in more than 7,000 launches globally since the dawn of the space race in 1957. And even in space itself, chemical propulsion methods, whether burning fuel in thrusters, or just spraying compressed cold gas out of the nozzle to get a little extra oomph at the right moment, are the primary way that probes and spacecraft explore the various planets, moons, and asteroids that make up our solar system. But chemical propulsion is a big problem. While it's very good at its short-term challenge of punching its way free of the Earth's gravity, it also requires a large amount of force to be applied over the course of just 8 or so minutes. And if they like to move and to orbit around a planet, they are just not efficient, and so run out of fuel quickly. For instance, let's take a look at this Falcon 9 rocket, the time favored by SpaceX in their hundreds of launches. While the Falcon 9 rocket has 549,054 kilograms of mass at launch, 395,700 kilograms of this mass is fuel. This leaves very little room in any rocket for the payload, for the part of the rocket that's actually trying to get into space in the first place. Why is so much fuel needed? The answer is in a chemical rocket's specific impulse, which is a measure in seconds of how much thrust you get for each unit of propellant. Think of it like the fuel economy of a spacecraft. While rockets are able to generate a lot of thrust, their specific impulse is quite low, never much higher than 500 seconds. They are like lightning fast sports cars with really bad mileage. They can do very powerful bursts, but will then quickly need to top up at the nearest fuel station. Sadly, we don't have many of those in space yet. Which brings us to the next currently existing technology, one which has almost complete opposite problem: electric thrusters. While not as commonly used as chemical thrusters, electric thrusters have seen use in missions like NASA's Dawn mission to the asteroid belt and by SpaceX's Starlink satellites. And by some metrics, these engines are impressive. Electrical or ion thrusters can have a specific impulse up to 10 times higher propulsion, allowing for far longer journeys or greater overall acceleration compared to their chemical counterparts. Electric thrusters come in many different types, but all work via Newton's third law, just like chemical rockets, pushing propellant out to push the rocket in the opposite direction. However, while chemical propulsion relies on hot reactions to produce their thrust, electrical thrusters, like the Hall effect thruster or the immediate ion thruster, work by creating electric or magnetic fields. Particles of noble gases like xenon or krypton are accelerated in these fields up to speeds of 140,000 kilometers an hour in ion thrusters, so less for Hall thrusters, and are sent flying off into space. When the particles accelerate one way, the spacecraft is pushed the other way. This is the advantage of electric thrusters in general. If you're accelerating your fuel up to 140,000 kilometers per hour, we're getting some really good mileage for each atom accelerated. When it comes to most thrusters, a key principle towards understanding them is momentum. And the thing with momentum is, if you don't know where to start with it can be hard to get the ball rolling. When I was studying at uni, I was finding myself as stuck as an object at rest. I sometimes needed help trying to become an object in motion. For me, that didn't come from reading textbooks. It came from practice. Testing my understanding with questions that forced me to engage my brain, which is why I really like Brilliant, today's sponsor. Brilliant has thousands of online lessons with interactive questions that get you thinking. It has courses on math, coding, and even momentum, like this fun lesson that uses cool to teach physics principles. It's great for helping you study, whether you're young or old, a student or a parent looking to help their kids. Brilliant's courses are developed by top researchers at MIT, Harvard, and Stanford. So go try them out today by scanning my QR code or following my link brilliant.org/extra in the description below. There's a 30-day free trial, and my viewers will also get 20% off an annual premium subscription, which gives you unlimited access to everything Brilliant has to offer. Seeing it gives you a little momentum too. Now, back to the pros and cons of electric thrusters. With all that acceleration, surely electric thrusters are just better than. Well, actually, no. There is a downside, a significant one. You see, electric thrusters actually have terrible thrust. Think of it like putting your thumb over the nozzle of a hose. By limiting the hole the water is coming through, the stream of water coming out of the hose turns into a powerful jet. But removing your thumb to create a bigger hole does not mean you get an even bigger jet. You only have so much water to work with. For electric thrusters, the problem is similar, except instead of water, it's electricity. Electric thrusters connected to a solar panel can get plenty of energy if you leave them to run for long enough in sufficient sunlight, but you don't get that energy all at once. You have a limit on how much fuel can be accelerated based on the electricity you get in a given moment. So, how little thrust are we talking about here? How much can electric thrusters generate? It turns out about the same amount of force as you feel from the gravity of a piece of paper lying flat in your hand. It can take days for an electric thruster to accelerate the spacecraft to get to 90 kilometers per hour. And while it can get up to 320,000 kilometers per hour eventually, as NASA had considered doing on future missions to Mars, if there's any friction or opposition to its movement, the electric thruster won't ever get off the ground. Don't use one of these to try and launch a rocket. Electric thrusters are good for marathons, not sprints. Still, neither of these technologies are currently suitable for the type of travel that humanity wants to eventually do around the solar system and beyond. Because chemical rockets use up their fuel so quickly, they can't actually accelerate for very long, and thus they attain a good top speed. Electric thrusters have a good top speed, but accelerating is a slow process. Once humans start ferrying large numbers of crews, machinery, and raw materials to places like Mars, the amount of mass needing to be accelerated is just too much. And of course, electric thrusters will eventually run out of fuel too. So, what is the future of space travel? It's time to look at some of the contenders. Before I show you what NASA is developing, I want to give an honorable mention to a technology that I find really cool. Japanese company Kobayashi is planning on finishing off a real-life space elevator by as soon as 2050. While not strictly a means of traveling through space, a space elevator is a fascinating alternative way to get something into space with a fraction of the energy costs that a chemical rocket has to expend. The principle behind it is simple. All you need is some kind of anchor, a space station or an asteroid that is orbiting the Earth in a perfect geostationary orbit. Then you dangle a cable down from that anchor until it reaches the ground. Finally, just put an elevator on it. With the right counterweight in place, a space elevator would require very little energy to be able to lift things into orbit. You just have to hope that nothing snaps the cable. Kobayashi wants to build their 96,000-kilometer cable out of carbon nanotubes and aim to attach it to a 12,500-ton spaceport counterweight. It will take around 20 years to build the cable and reinforce it, but they say work should start in 2030. If all goes as planned, we could witness a space elevator on Earth that can carry 100-ton climbers by 2050. That would open a lot of doors for space exploration, and I imagine that lifting that cable into space would be quite the sight. In the meantime, NASA has been contemplating more immediate problems. They are hoping to send the first astronauts to Mars as early as the 2030s, so new technology will be needed by then. And they've come up with a solution. It turns out the future might be nuclear. The heat from nuclear fusion can be used to heat up a glowing liquid propellant, turning it into an expanding gas and jettisoning it out of the back of the rocket at a rate that is twice as efficient as a chemical rocket. This is called thermal propulsion. Alternatively, nuclear electric rockets would work by making electricity through nuclear fusion, essentially putting a nuclear power plant on a rocket and then using it to make the electric fields that are the basis of normal electric thrusters. Nuclear energy would provide more immediate electricity, so you could outpace normal iron thrusters with a large enough nuclear rocket. NASA hopes that nuclear rockets will be able to halve the journey time that is currently projected for a trip to Mars by doubling the specific impulse. These rockets wouldn't necessarily be launched directly from Earth's surface, you'll perhaps be glad to know. Although NASA toyed with that idea back in the 1960s with Project Orion. These rockets were intended to work by pulsing out repeated nuclear detonations behind the rocket and just riding the shockwaves into space. That would have been quite a radioactive mess. It's probably for the best that NASA scrapped that idea. But if you start in orbit, nuclear rockets are generally safer for the population of Earth. Even if there's a catastrophic problem and the reactor melts down, there's no one nearby to suffer from the negative consequences of the fallout spreading, except for those unlucky to be on the rocket, of course. Still, radiation in space is already a problem for astronauts that needs to be overcome. Just one trip to Mars could subject astronauts to 60% of the radiation limit that's recommended for their entire career, and that's assuming the journey only lasts 6 months. Some NASA plans see the round trip taking 2 to 3 years, because when flying from one moving planet to another, there's a lot of wiggle room when it comes to preferred trip length. Anything that reduces the time spent in space will mean less radiation for the crew and the passengers. That said, less radiation from space is only good if you can avoid getting radiation from your nuclear rocket. And nuclear rockets will need to be careful when accelerated near the planet's atmosphere, as due to the process of heating over time to nuclear sources, that propellant will be irradiated, which could over time lead to environmental problems. So while it's exciting that these spacecraft will be so big and powerful, great care will need to be taken with this technology. But what of further journeys? Even nuclear power can only get us